There's the memorable synthesizer opening. Konami Computer Entertainment Japan presents. I think they've been renamed to some other studio at some point. I don't know if they still exist. Hideo Kojima still exists as a game developer, game director. Earlier this week, he's announced at least 2 games in development, the sequel to Death Stranding and another tactical espionage game called Fizzint. I think he might be working on a movie or game. So that's 3 properties that he's working on.
Disposal facility on Shadow Moses Island in Alaska.
Ohio-class nuclear submarine Discovery. So you might or might not know, but Ohio-class is an actual designation in the U.S. Navy. It's reserved for nuclear-armed submarines. I think there's around 12 at the time of this recording. I think they might be in the process of being decommissioned, but the Discovery is not one of those real submarines. That's actually a reference to the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey. The spaceship in that movie is called the Discovery. And a couple of characters in this game have the same names as characters in that movie.
We'll approach the disposal facility by sub. And then we'll launch a...
I won't say which characters at this point.
After the SDV gets as close as it can, dispose of it. From there on, you'll have to swim.
Okay, there's a brief shot of the SDV being launched from the Discovery sub. The game calls it a swimmer delivery vehicle, but in reality it's called a SEAL delivery vehicle.
So they're still around.
There are 6 members of Foxhound involved in this terrorist activity.
I'm assuming that the design is based on a real STV.
A beautiful and deadly shot.
If you played Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, there's a memorable mission in which the player character and other allies are riding an STV, but it's more like a wagon, an underwater wagon, whereas this one is more of a self-contained capsule.
Foxhound squad leader, Liquid Snake.
Liquid Snake?
The man with the same code name as you. The nuclear weapons disposal facility covers the whole island. I'll instruct you by codec after you reach your target.
Anyone going with me?
As usual, this is a one-man infiltration mission.
Weapons and equipment OSP?
Yes. This is a top-secret black op. Don't expect any official...
So OSP is not a real term. Like, that's a term that's been invented for this game by the localization writer, Jeremy Blaustein. Just listen to this music. That's great. It just starts really quiet at low sound, and then it builds up. It's really good. Let's go, new game. 3, 2, 1, now. Now this opening angles that you see, it's the same for the first game, but if you replay the game, like you load a completed save file, the angles for this opening sequence are gonna vary. That's something that people might not know or notice, but that's a nice touch. Now, you're seeing credits for the voice actors, but David Hayter is the only voice actor in this version of the game who's listed with their real name. Everyone else is using pseudonyms. And to give context, at the time of the recording, as I understand, there had been some kind of union situation, and that's why all of the voice actors, including David Hayter, are credited with pseudonyms. But in some versions, like this one, David Hayter has his real name, but in other versions, he's got Sean Barker as his on-screen credit name.
This is Snake. Colonel, can you hear me?
Loud and clear. What's the situation, Snake?
Looks like the elevator in the back is the only way up.
Just as I expected. You'll have to take the elevator to the surface, but make sure nobody sees you. If you need to, contact me by codec. The frequency is 140.85.
So 140.85 is the traditional frequency for the character who's serving as the mission commander.
You hear that noise? Press the select button. The codec's receiver directly...
It's a tradition that spans multiple Metal Gear Solid games. Not just the Metal Gear Solid games, but the Metal Gear games. Okay. To be specific, the 0.85 part of the radio, because the Metal Gear games, all the radio frequencies are one. They don't start with 140. They start with a different sequence of numbers, but it's always something 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 dot 85 as the frequency for the mission commander. Oh, so these credits listed on the screen overlaid while you're playing, that's something that had been new at the time. It's easy to take for granted now, but that cinematic presentation that this game brings to the table had been a revelation, I would say, at the time. Okay, let's see here. Okay, all right.
Snake, there's an elevator there you can take up to the ground. You'll just have to wait for the elevator to come down. You better hide somewhere.
So now I have 2 rations. That's the max that you can have on normal and hard and extreme. Even this camera angle, it's, again, easy to take for granted, but no other games had done this type of presentation at the time. It's not just for show, it gives you like a view around corners and such, but moving is it's counterintuitive because the controls are relative to the character, not the camera. So if I want to move to Snake's right or camera left, I've got to hold right on the analog stick, but I'm not going to do that right now because there's a guard right there. Okay. Focus. Attention. So Snake's gonna don or discard his scuba gear, not really caring about enemies finding it. Now, the gear that he's using is known as a closed circuit breathing apparatus, in that it's just one circuit. So it's one loop that recirculates oxygen using a natural chemical process. There's some substance in it. I think I'd have to look it up, but basically it recirculates. Basically, it recycles the carbon dioxide that he breathes out and turns it into oxygen for him to breathe in. Whereas the scuba gear that most people associate with underwater swimming is like 2 tanks, one for oxygen, one for carbon dioxide. But he's using that closed circuit. I don't know what the model is, but that's what he's using. It's better suited for shallow water because that recirculation process, it isn't quick enough to do deep underwater swimming.
I'm in front of the disposal facility.
Excellent, Snake. Age hasn't slowed you down one bit.
Thanks to the VR training I did on board the Discovery.
So those two lines of dialogue,
I'm nice and dry,
the one from Camel and the one from Snake, those are gameplay specific and save file specific. So because I hadn't been caught on the dock part, Campbell complimented my speed and skill. And because I've completed the Discovery or the VR missions for this game and I have a save file, the game recognized that.
Two F-16s just took off
And Snake mentioned that VR training on the Discovery that's named after the 2001 A Space Odyssey spaceship, as I mentioned. But I've always known about Campbell's dialogue
But it looks like our little diversion
after you get to the heliport, but
is your best chance to slip in unnoticed.
that line about the VR training, I hadn't known about that until a couple months ago. So that's something that even I hadn't known about, despite me playing this game probably at least a dozen times. If, for example, you get caught or spotted on the dock at some point, Campbell will then say something like, "You haven't wasted a lot of time getting caught, have you, Snake?" Yeah.
There are only 18 hours left until their deadline. You've got to hurry.
Wow, you must be crazy to fly a hind in this kind of weather.
Who's that?
Oh, sorry. I haven't introduced you to yet. This is Mei Ling. She was assigned to us as our visual and data processing specialist. She designed your codec, as well as your Soliton radar system. Contact her if you have any questions about either of them.
Nice to meet you, Snake. It's an honor to speak to a living legend like yourself. What's wrong?
Nothing. I just didn't expect a world-class designer of military technology to be so cute.
You're just flattering me.
No, I'm serious. Well, I know I won't be bored for the next 18 hours.
Come on. I can't believe I'm being hit on by the famous Solid Snake. But I'm surprised. You're very frank for a trained killer.
We both have a lot to learn about each other.
Yeah, I'm looking.
That's an awkward line of dialogue. You're pretty frank for a
But
trained
first,
killer.
Let me explain about your Soliton radar system. The bright dot in the middle is you, Snake.
But overall, I like the dialogue in this game. I'll give credit to Jeremy Blaustein. I know there's been some kind of friction between him and Hideo Kojima. I think it's more along Kojima not quite understanding or appreciating the liberties that Blaustein might have taken to localize the dialogue for this game, but I'm going to side with him. I feel like
Get whatever
natural dialogue is not Kojima's strength. Like if you played other Metal Gear games, then you'll know what I mean.
Snake, your radar isn't affected by the weather, but if you're discovered by an enemy, you won't be able to use it.
Yes, it gets jammed easily, I'm afraid.
Yes, it's all made from currently existing technology. You won't be able to use it in an area.
I remember some people not knowing what currently existing technology means. I think that is kind of an awkward
Just by codec anytime you want.
Got it.
translation or localization. I would have said something like, it's all available from commercially available technology.
I'm also in charge of your mission data. Contact me if you want me to record your current status.
Or established technology.
140.96. It's a dedicated frequency for saving data. Don't forget it.
Remember,
And there's that wink at the end. It's easy to miss.
you need to arm yourself with whatever weapon.
Going back to traditional
First, I'm strip searching.
frequencies, 140.96 is the traditional save frequency in the Metal Gear Solid games.
Well, if you make it back in one piece, maybe I'll let you do a strip search on me.
I'll hold you to that, Doctor. By the way, sorry to disappoint you, but I did manage to smuggle out my smokes.
How did you do that?
In my stomach? Thanks to the shot you gave me that suppressed my stomach acid.
I think every Metal Gear game, except for the very first one, has
You never know.
radio frequencies that start with a 140 prefix.
If you want to get in, there's the front door. It's the fastest way, but there's too much risk of being spotted by the enemy.
I can't just knock on the door and ask them.
This sequence is in real time.
There's one sentry on the left and one on the right.
Like, it's not
5-6ers.
pre-rendered. If you, for example, because while Snake is going through his items, it shows the number of rations that you've picked up to this point. And I happen to have 2.
What about the air duct near the door? There should also be a duct on the second floor.
I can't see it from here.
I'll let you decide the best COA. I'm counting on you, Snake.
Alright, I need to focus. I want to discuss some aspects of the story, but I don't want to get caught. Okay. Here's a line of dialogue that kind of...
A surveillance camera?
somewhat controversial. People are... what's the word I'm looking for? They kind of mock how Snake seems surprised that there's a surveillance camera on a base like this one, but it kind of does make sense because it's so remote and secretive. You think that that remoteness would be its surveillance, that there wouldn't really need to be, like, the remoteness would be its security. There wouldn't really need to be any type of surveillance equipment because everyone who's here is supposed to be here. So it kind of makes sense for him to be somewhat surprised by the presence of a security camera, surveillance camera. Stun grenades are going to be useful down the road. Okay. So I can crawl through that duct, or I can crawl through the duct on the second floor. This one is closer, but I'd have to distract the guard and use another one of my chaff grenades. But if I use the duct on the second floor, I don't have to use a chaff grenade. And there's actually a special cutscene that plays if you go through the duct on the second floor. So that's what I'm going to do. But first I'm going to pick up this SOCOM in the back of this truck. Now this SOCOM is optional. If you don't pick it up, that's fine. You can pick one up in the armory later in the game. And if you don't pick up that SOCOM, you'll get one as a result of a cutscene. And these trucks actually serve as fast travel points later in the game. If you pick up a cardboard box and then climb aboard one of these trucks and then equip that cardboard box, it'll transport you to a different spot in the game. Now, if you've never played a Metal Gear game, know that cardboard boxes are a staple of the series. It's a running joke. But they do have practical purposes, like, as I mentioned, enabling fast travel. Gotta get under that blind spot. Oh man, whoa, that guard is heading toward me. So I'm gonna wait out this guard on the second floor. A couple of interesting things. So earlier, both Campbell and I think Mei Ling mentioned, or maybe it was Campbell, there was 2 references to the deadline being 18 hours away. That's an instance of the dialogue taking into account time, right? The premise is that the terrorists have issued a 24-hour deadline to the government, but you've got to consider the amount of time for the government to formulate a response, and part of that response had been coercing Snake into taking on this mission for him to be briefed aboard the USS Discovery. So basically, 6 hours have passed since that deadline, that ultimatum being issued, and this point here in the story. And if you watch the optional briefing sequence that shows Snake being briefed aboard the USS Discovery, they mention that the deadline had been issued 5 hours prior, which makes sense because the briefing comes before this point in the story. I'm just waiting out. While I'm waiting, I'll mention that the accents for both Mei Ling and for Naomi, who've been introduced in the prior dialogue conversation, it doesn't make sense. Right? Because if you read up on the backstory for Mei Ling, she's from the US.
That base must have some kind of ventilation system to recirculate the air. There should be air ducts around there somewhere. They must need a lot of power to run the base. There's probably a diesel generator somewhere. And since generating electricity requires oxygen, there must be exhaust openings for that too.
I was going to call him Captain Obvious, but he's more like Colonel Obvious.
F-16s we were using as a diversion with a Hind D. Then we got a message from Liquid. He said if we try something like that again, he'll launch the nuke. Snake, hurry up and get in there. That Hind will be coming back soon.
Okay.
Snake, this is McDonald Miller. It's been a long time.
Master, what are you doing here?
I quit being a drill instructor, so I moved out here for some peace and quiet. I'm in retirement, just like you. Once in a while, I still help train the Alaskan Scouts.
Passing on the skills to a new generation, huh?
Campbell told me about the situation here. I thought I might be of some use.
There's no one I'd rather have in a foxhole than you.
Well, I know lots about survival in a harsh environment. I've lived in Alaska longer than you, so call me if you have any questions about the flora or fauna out here. My frequency is 141.80.
So there's another traditional frequency. 141.80 is reserved for the character who serves as like the savvy veteran role, someone who is a consultant and an expert on weapons and tactics. Here we go.
I moved the Darker Chief to the cell in the first floor basement.
What about the vent shaft cleaning?
They just opened the vent covers. They're about to start spraying for rats.
Okay, that explains why the vents are open.
First floor basement ventilation shaft.
Shut those covers as soon as they're done spraying. Also, keep your eye on that woman in the cell. Don't get careless now.
Woman in the cell?
Wait, did they mention an intruder? I wasn't paying attention. Unless maybe that intruder is Snake if you kill people. I really should pay more attention. And there's another ration. What happened? I pressed the punch button to climb down the ladder.
Use the elevator to change floors. There should be a cargo elevator that you can take down somewhere around there. Try to find it.
All right, I'm gonna save it. Let's call Mei Ling.
You found out where the DARPA chief is. With his nanomachine transmitter, he should show up as a green dot on your radar when you get close. Try to find him.
Will do. Tank hangar.
Come on, Snake, you can do it.